Hello, I'm Sheryl McCarthy of the City University of New York. Welcome to One to One. It's not every day that the installation of a new church minister gets written up in the New York Times and Time magazine, but that was the case with Dr. Amy Butler, who just took over as senior minister of the Riverside Church. Of course, even in a city with thousands of churches and religious institutions, Riverside stands out for its imposing cathedral-like structure, for being the place where national and world figures come to speak when they're in town, and where notables from all walks of life are memorialized after they pass on, and for its long history of championing social justice issues of all kinds. Some of its former ministers have been stars as well, but until now, none of them has been a woman. We'll discuss Dr. Butler's thoughts about taking over this prestigious post and what she sees ahead for this world-famous institution. Welcome.
Thank you.
As I said, Riverside Church is a star among churches. How did it get to be that way?
Well, I think, it has this amazing history, and it was started with the idea that it could be a place where differing voices could come together. And as it lived out its life as an institution over the 20th century, there were so many defining movements that were shaping our country, and the leaders of the Riverside Church spoke to these movements in compelling ways, and I think that really put the church in a special place to be a voice for Protestant Christianity around some of these issues that are so definitive for our country: civil rights, the Vietnam War, things like that.
Now, I know that John D. Rockefeller, who built the church, was a Baptist, but Riverside is interdenominational, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. As we both said, it has a history of really intellectually stimulating social activist leaders, among them Harry Emerson Fosdick, William Sloane Coffin Jr. Yet in recent years, it seems to have lost some of its luster and perhaps even some of its social outreach energy. I don't know. I mean, do you think that's true?
Well, I think the church has been through a tough period of transition, and this is being echoed, of course, across the country in institutions of varying denominations, because the institutional church is really questioning its role in society and what that's going to look like in the future. And I think, in some ways, the Riverside Church is a microcosm for church in America, and all of us are asking these questions of tough transition and wondering who we are, and it's normal for communities of faith to go through that, and the Riverside Church has gone through it and has come to the other side now.
What made you want to come to Riverside?
Well, the Riverside Church, as you've said, has such a reputation. Everybody in my world knows of the Riverside Church, and when I entered the discernment, trying to think about whether this would be a good fit, that was imposing to me, this image of this amazing institution. But I really started asking myself the question, is God calling me to be with these people at this time? And that was really the driving question that was forming my discernment around it. And in conversation with them, I really felt like the questions they were asking were questions that I wanted to ask too, and that God was calling me to come and be their pastor. And so for that reason I went. I also am so taken with the opportunity that this church has to speak to some of these questions about what the institutional church is going to be in our society in the future.
It's interesting. In the interest of full disclosure, I sang in the choir at Riverside Church for 7 years.
Come back.
But one of my former choir members said, she was talking about all the turmoil that church has been through, and she said, well, what Riverside needs next is an Asian woman lesbian minister. Now, you're not all of those. You're some of those things.
Some of them, not all
some of
of
those
them.
ain't not all of those. But it needed a change, she was saying, a different approach. What led you into the religious life?
Well, that's such a good question, Cheryl. I grew up in the Hawaiian Islands. My father is a native Hawaiian community activist and organizer, so I grew up in that sort of melting pot culture of the Hawaiian Islands and have my Hawaiian identity as strong informant on my formation. And my parents were very conservative, devoted, evangelical Christians, and so I grew up with faith and church being an important part of my life, but I never saw a woman at the head of the church. So my thought was that I should go to college and marry a pastor, because that's what we do in our world when we're women and we want to serve the church. And that didn't work out so well for me. I started feeling this call and pull to leadership in the church, and I decided I would hear the message that my parents also gave me, which was, you can do anything you want to do. And so that's how my vocational journey started. I went to seminary.
So when you went to seminary, did you come out as an evangelical preacher, or what did you come out as? What were you?
Well, I went to a Baptist seminary in Europe.
Okay.
So I studied with people from all over the world, an international group, and that really challenged a lot of my thoughts about life and faith, and also being a woman in a denominational expression that didn't really support women in leadership really helped.
You meant the Baptist church?
Yes,
Yeah.
really helped me sort of rethink my theology and my approach to faith.
Now, you were at Calvary Baptist Church in Washington for 11 years. Now, traditionally, some people have said when women have been hired as senior ministers, if at all, it tends to be at small, struggling congregations. But you are now one of several women who've been called recently to much larger churches. So is something shifting?
Well, I think there are more women who are going to seminary and who are training to become pastors, and so that's shifting things. And I think society is changing, and societal standards are changing, and opportunities for women to step into these positions of leadership are becoming more available.
I know several of the finalists for the job that you got were women.
Yes.
Do you think Riverside was actively looking for a woman?
I think that they were looking for diversity. That's a very important value of that congregation. And yes, I think that they were keeping that in their minds as they were looking.
Are there particular challenges that come with being a female senior minister?
Well, I think one of the challenges that I've experienced is just people are unsure how to interact with a female senior minister, because there's so much in our society and all of our experiences with religious institutions that lead us to believe the pastor is an old white man. So sometimes there are issues of discomfort and just people don't know how to interact with me, but we get over it.
You talked about your evangelical background, and it seems that evangelical churches seem to be the rage around the country. Even as you've moved away from it, they seem to be the rage around the country these days. I mean, churches with mega campuses, mega congregations, ministers who live in big houses, drive big cars, and appear on television. Why do you think the evangelical church seems to have a lot of pull these days? And what do you see in the midst of this trend? What do you see as Riverside's role?
Well, I think the evangelical pull is waning. That's what I think. I think some of the more conservative religious institutions that offer black and white answers, standards that everybody can follow, people are attracted to that kind of concrete approach to church. I'm not willing to give up the word evangelical, because I think that those of us who are more liberal in our approach to faith have sort of turned that over to the more conservative folks. And I think that the gospel message is compelling, and I don't want to give it up. So there is a place for the traditional church, which the Riverside Church is, and there is a place in that church setting for this kind of transformative message to be preached, and I just see that as really hopeful for this church.
Riverside, as we said, has had some difficulties in recent years. The last minister lasted only a few months. Reportedly, there's been some polarization between black and white members of the church. I know there have been financial issues. I know there's been wrangling over the kind of music they have in Sunday services, over the style of worship services. Were you aware of those problems when you applied for this job?
Welcome to
And
Church
would
Work,
you
Cheryl.
Church Wars, that could be a reality show.
No, this is life and community. You know, it's messy. And you know, the Riverside Church, a lot of its struggles have been played out in the media, and so many people are aware of the struggles that this church has undergone. I don't think they're unique. Churches all over the place have trouble getting along and cultivating diversity and living in community, and these are normal struggles. Yes.
I know it's been said there's nothing more vicious than academic politics and church politics.
Church can be a tricky and painful place.
How would you describe the state of things at Riverside Church right now?
Well, I've been there for 8 weeks, and I'm feeling a sense of gracious welcome. People have been so open to me and some of the different sort of approaches that I've been bringing in, and hopeful. I feel hope. I feel hope there.
What do you see as the immediate needs or the most pressing issues in the congregation right now?
Well, I need to get to know the folks there, and they need to get to know me and to learn to trust me as their pastor. And that's going to be the focus of my initial work, really, to learn about the congregation, which is huge and does so many amazing things.
How many members right now?
There are about 1,900 members, so I have a lot of people to get to know. And there are wonderful programs that are going on throughout the building that it will take me months to get up to speed on all of that. But our work initially is to learn how to be the church together. And that's the way in which we're going to build a community that's going to be transformative to the world, that's going to speak to some of the pressing issues in our society, as is the tradition, the proud tradition of this church.
Do you get a sense of there being polarization there, either on the racial lines or, I don't know, any kind of whatever?
Oh, Cheryl, churches everywhere have their issues.
Okay,
you know, and I'm learning about a lot of the pain of the past and hoping that we can live into relationship together that's unifying.
We're going to take a short break, then we'll be back in a moment with more with Dr. Amy Butler, Senior Minister of the Riverside Church. Welcome back to One to One. I'm Sheryl McCarthy of the City University of New York, and I'm talking with Dr. Amy Butler, Senior Minister of the Riverside Church. You had mentioned the programs at Riverside Church. Tell me about some of the programs.
Well, there are many campaigns for various social justice issues, as you may be aware, but a lot of people don't know that the Riverside Church has this amazing food pantry. For 4 days a week, 60 families come in and go shopping, and it's really stunning and wonderful. And there's a clothes closet there and a shower ministry. The church has
shower ministry.
A shower ministry. You can come take a shower,
no. Okay.
do your laundry. There's a barber training program in our building, which is amazing. There's a wonderful early education preschool in the building. And the Riverside Hawks are there. It's a youth basketball program that uses our gyms and has produced some of the finest NBA athletes in its 50 years. It's astounding.
Okay. You've been there for 8 weeks now. How have you spent your first 8 weeks?
Well, Cheryl, if you're on social media, you should follow me all over Facebook. I'm going around to all the different groups in the church, and I went to choir practice.
Oh my goodness!
I went to the inspirational choir practice, going to picnics with the gay and lesbian group, and I went to Fall Harvest Day yesterday at the church, and so I'm trying to get to know everybody and attend as many of these things as I can.
Mm-hmm. Have you learned anything that has surprised you?
Yes, anyone who walks into the Riverside Church is overwhelmed by the beauty and magnificence of that building. And I think I have been as well. But what has surprised me is, there's a church in here. It's a church of people who are asking questions about faith, who want to learn how to live in community together, who want to be agents of change in the world. It's a church. It's a church like any other church. And that continues to surprise me.
Mm-hmm. On that same vein, I mean, while we talked about Riverside Church being a host to the famous and the history of activism, but it also has a duty to administer to its congregation, as all churches do. Do you have a sense that it's been doing that?
Well, I think it's been 5 long years of, transitional ministers leading the ship and everybody sort of waiting for a direction and for someone to come to be their pastor.
Right.
So it's been rough. And I feel some relief in the congregation.
Now, I know that you're still in the process of getting to know the church and getting to know the members. Are there any changes that you have made already?
Yes, and this change has been noticed by many, and maybe when you come to the church you can see it too. When in the front entryway, when you walk in, there are some glass cases that have had posters about various programs going on, and I asked our communications department to change those posters to be pictures of our community together in worship and in ministry. And so when you walk in the building, you will see this is a community of faith that loves each other and that is here to change the world. And so that's gotten some notes from folks. They've noticed that.
Mm-hmm. And you've also indicated to me off camera that the sermons are going to get shorter, or the services are going to get shorter.
Services are shorter. Yeah, it's my tradition to preach about 15 to 17 minutes, and so that's shaping things down a little bit. Mm-hmm. So that's been a bit of a change.
How have you adjusted to being in New York as opposed to you in Washington, D.C. for about 11 years?
So you would think coming from Washington, D.C. would just be seamless, but this city is a unique place. I love the energy, and it's been a huge learning curve for me on every front.
Mm-hmm. And now you have 3 children.
I do.
So I assume they will be spending some time here. What do they think of the city so far, or what's their experience been?
So they're older, and so they're here on school breaks and so on. They love it. They love the energy. It's super exciting. Who wouldn't want to move to Manhattan?
So what do you want people to know about Riverside Church that perhaps they don't know?
Well, I think the Riverside Church has been living under this sort of shadow of transition and difficulty, and I want to share what I'm finding, that this is a church full of people who really want to be the church, and this is a place full of light and life, and it's moving into the future in ways that are hopeful.
Mm-hmm. Speaking about the future and moving forth with hope, do you have it's probably kind of early, but do you have a sort of 5-year plan in the back of your mind, or do you have certain priorities for the church?
Well, as I mentioned, our first priority is to learn to be the church together, but one of the reasons...
What do you mean by that? Tell me about it.
I said in a sermon 2 weeks ago that our voice on the streets of Ferguson, Missouri doesn't mean anything until we begin being the church inside our walls. The church does not have a compelling voice in society until we learn to love each other. And so that's what I mean when I talk about being community together. But one of the things that really pulled me to this calling was this shifting sense of the institutional church in America. What are we going to be? The Riverside Church is where some of that entrepreneurial newness can be born. This is a place where we can try to live out what the future of the church is going to be. And I hope that we can get to that place.
What do you think it's moving toward? What do you think it's moving from, and what direction do you think it's moving in?
So I think we're coming off a period of time in American society when, everybody went to church. It was just expected, and that's not the case anymore, which has left those of us who do this kind of work in a kind of a panic, We can't rest on our laurels anymore. For me, this is an exciting time, mm-hmm. because we get to reinvent who the church is. We can be more edgy, we can be more prophetic, we can really know who we are, and we can really have a compelling voice in society. And I'm excited about that.
Now, you said you went to seminary overseas.
I did.
Where?
I went to a Baptist seminary that was located in Zurich, Switzerland. It's since moved to Prague, but it's called the International Baptist Theological Seminary. I had colleagues from 30 different countries in my class.
What prompted you to go there as opposed to locally?
So as you pointed out, I'm a Baptist, and it's difficult for women in the Baptist world still, but back in the day when I was coming up 20 years ago, it was very contentious in Baptist life. And
You mean the idea of women in the seminary, women in the ministry?
Right. And so I wanted to go somewhere where that wouldn't be the constant issue that was informing my studies. And also, who doesn't want to go to Europe?
Well, that's
It's fun.
true. That's true. I grew up Baptist
Yes.
in the South, and I think even now, certainly in the Black Baptist Church, I think there's a prohibition on women senior ministers. They just don't lead churches. They may be an assistant pastor, and they may read the announcements, or they may be in charge of the educational program, but they don't lead the churches. Is that still true of the Baptist Church in the United States, pretty much?
It's difficult for women in the Baptist church. And, that has not been a focus of my ministry in these last 11 years, but this shift has brought it to light again. And I had this amazing experience. I got an email from a young woman in Kentucky who said it had taken her a year and a half to get her first interim position. And on her first Sunday, one of the elderly members of the church walked up to her and handed her a New York Times article about the Riverside Church calling me. And she said, that was affirmation for me. And so it's important. It's important.
So was Calvary your first post as a...
As a senior minister, yes.
Okay.
And they took a chance on a young 32-year-old woman.
And tell me what the curve was there, what that was like, those 11 years there.
Wow, I learned a lot. Well, I was called into a church in an urban center that was struggling. And there was a very small group of people in worship who were largely white and coming in from the suburbs. And here was this church in the middle of downtown DC in a neighborhood that was undergoing regeneration. And so the church went through severe conflict and had to sort of recreate what it was meant to be and do in that place, and came out on the other side with this lovely, amazing, diverse, prophetic congregation in the middle of downtown DC. It's a great church.
And the congregation grew while you were there, correct?
Yes.
Recently, there have been, I think, a couple of other women who have been appointed to very large churches. Yes. Tell me about that, and what do you hear from them, and do they have any advice to offer you?
It's been fun because both of them are my friends. So, Shannon is in Chicago at Fourth Presbyterian, and Ginger at Foundry United Methodist in Washington, D.C., and we've been joking that, if this pastor gig doesn't work out, we could maybe go on the road together, because we're always being cited together in all these articles.
Not the three tenors, maybe the three
pastors.
Right.
I don't know, but I think it's a wonderful recognition that there are so many talented women out there who are doing this work. And
when you were in seminary, were there a lot of women in seminary?
There were, and increasingly, women are now outnumbering men in seminary. So it's not for lack of women, it's just for, just a societal shift in expectation.
Right. So I was there on the Sunday that you gave your first sermon. Were your parents there? What do they think about your choice of career and your being called to Riverside?
Well, I think my parents, have come a long way in their understanding of my vocation, and they're very, very supportive. I think my whole family, who was here for the installation, were just a little overwhelmed, with just the bigness and the prestige and just the considerable nature of this job and of this amazing institution. But they've just been wonderful.
So they've gotten over the fact that you did marry a pastor and said you became one.
They've gotten over it.
Okay.
I think they have.
Well, I'm sure it's gonna, I'm familiar with Riverside, so I know it's gonna be interesting.
It'll be an exciting ride.
It's gonna be interesting. We're out of time. I want to thank Dr. Amy Butler for joining me today. If you'd like to learn more about the Riverside Church, you can go to their website at theriversidechurchny.org. For the City University of New York and One to One, I'm Sheryl McCarthy. If there are any people you'd like to hear from or topics you'd like us to explore, please let us know. You can write to me at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, 10016, or you can go to the website at cuny.tv and click on Contact Us. I look forward to hearing from you.